Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Super 2. Joining me today is
Steve.
It's Steve, everybody's favorite Steve. Yeah. So what are we talking about tonight, Steve?
Tonight we're talking about the weird phenomena you get in ongoing fiction that people refer to as jumping the shark. So a moment in a series, a movie, a TV show, a book, like whatever, where something happens that seems like it essentially just breaks the premise going forward. The term itself comes from an episode of Happy Days where the Fonz literally jumps a shark. And historically people trace it like, okay, this is when the show went off the rails. And that's kind of what I mean. I feel like there's a lot of people who, because I was looking up lists and examples and stuff, I feel like there's a lot of people that associate jumping with a shark with just like when a thing got bad. And that's not what I mean. I mean like really specifically like what's the turning point as far as like a story choice goes where you're no longer functioning under the same premise anymore and it's gotten worse. So I'll give you an example if we want to go from here as just where this came from in my head. But I was watching another Gundam show the other day called 00 Gundam or Gundam 00, and it's 2 seasons of a TV show with a lot of politicking and a lot of war factions and a lot of back and forth. And after the show's over, there's an epilogue movie that comes out that takes place like 2 years after the end of the series. And you know, you're kind of set up for like all these questions about, is war okay if you're under attack, or is it okay to become terrorists in order to stop an evil war power or something like that. And the premise of the movie is there are sentient alien metal things coming at Earth and we gotta shoot them down. And it's the first time Gundam's ever had like legitimate aliens. And that made me think like, have we jumped the shark here? Have we gone to the point of no return where this is not salvageable anymore? And I tried really hard to like the movie in spite of the metal sentient alien symbiote thingies, but man, it sucked. And it just made me think, is this the point where things got off the rails enough just on the pitch alone that you kind of can't salvage it anymore?
That's an interesting one, because I don't know if I ever like considered that's what jumping the shark meant. To me, it was just more when like something was so ridiculous in a piece that you couldn't like suspend disbelief anymore.
Sure.
As opposed to like the show's gone off the rails, they're out of ideas. So like for me, a jumping the shark moment, I kind of had this when I was trying to rewatch Batman the Animated Series, because like I like Kevin Conroy, I like a lot of the DCAU, but like I've never really had much of an attachment to BTAS, so I was trying to go through and just give it a fair shot. I was finding like a lot of it kind of low-key boring because the pacing was just, you know, early 90s pacing. But then there was just an episode where it's not like a supervillain, it's not like some, you know, terrorist with a bomb or whatever. It's just like some dude Batman wants to get information from, and he just starts chasing him down with the bat plane while he's in a car, and like the guy drives through a tunnel and Batman drives the plane through the other side and like pierces the car. and then like uses a little robot arm and the Batwing to grab the guy out of the car, and then he throws the car in the river and he's flying him around, and he gets his little fucking microphone out and he's like, where's blah blah blah, and the dude just passes the fuck out and Batman doesn't get any information, and I'm just like, well, of course not. That was ridiculous. What were you doing? It was just too much. And I kind of fell off of it after that. And so it's just, that might not be a jump the shark moment, but that's like more along the lines of what I think when it comes to jumping the shark, of just like when logic seems to completely leave and the like premise just becomes, but won't this look cool? And it's just like, yeah, maybe it'll look cool, maybe, but once you've just removed it, like once you've completely broken suspension of disbelief, it doesn't matter how cool you might be able to visualize it on screen, it's gonna just get laughed at. I think I have that kind of with like the Bayformers movies. Like, just I think the first movie jumps the shark. And everything after that just gets progressively worse. It just that's to me more what jumping the shark means, is just this idea of like, once you've just broken suspension of disbelief and it just becomes laughable.
Well, and I think interestingly, there are a lot of examples of like when something in the other definition of jump the shark, when they happen, the people know that they have broken the premise, and the only thing that can follow from there is either the series stops or they reinvent it because they knew this wasn't sustainable anymore. And I feel like that actually happens quite a bit, like the Halloween movies. So like the first one, very low budget, basic serial killer kind of vibe. Michael Myers just going into a house and killing a dude. And then the second movie is basically the same thing. The third doesn't count. And then the fourth and fifth one are kind of the same thing. But then the sixth one is when you start getting this elaborate explanation about the Mark of Thorn and being possessed to kill during full moons and on Halloween, and these magic runes and stuff that control him. And it got so preposterous that everything after that just had to ignore that ever happened.
Yeah, I think Freddy also has like a similar kind of thing with that. Like,
yeah,
Dream Warriors is probably where it started, but it's like, just Dream Warriors has like the coolest fucking line ever. Freddy Krueger, the bastard son of 1,000 madmen. That like you kind of are with it, but then after Dream Warriors, it's like, well, you've already made it to the point where literally they're able to control the dreams back at him. So like, what are we doing here still? And they just, kind of keep going for more movies, and then Wes Craven comes in and tries to like completely reinvent it. And no one besides me likes that movie.
Oh, I love that movie. New Nightmare rules. It's the best one.
Thank you. Okay.
It's literally the best one. We should talk about that, actually.
That'd be a good one, yeah. But like, then after that, they go back and they just, you get Freddy vs. Jason, and that's just trying to be camp and ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think there's maybe an interesting tangent to talk about with this, of at what point does jumping the shark like go over into just being campy? Because I feel like there's a similar connection between those two things, but campy can be fun and good, whereas jumping the shark is kind of like universally seen as bad.
So interesting connection on that front. I've actually got an article coming out about the Flintstones comic here pretty soon, so I've been going back and reading a lot about the history of the Flintstones and like watching episodes about the Flintstones and just learning weird things about the production of that show that I never knew. But that, I think, is a good example of like, it's a comedy, it's an animated sitcom, it's like Honeymooners except it's prehistoric, you've got dinosaurs all over the place, like it's already pretty preposterous. But then the Great Gazoo shows up, and he's just alien god Mixelplix fifth dimension imp thing, and I feel like that's a pretty stark example of like, I understand why you're doing this to facilitate more campy storytelling, but is this not a bridge too far?
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, you mentioned Mr. Mixelplick there. The comics did that shit too, right? Like,
Yeah.
Superman was already doing crazy, impossible stuff every fucking issue, but then it's just like, well, then how do you keep telling the story about that? So then they have to increase the stakes, and so you have a godlike being of pure magic come over. And then it just gets more ridiculous, and suddenly, fucking Lois Lane's getting turned into a gorilla or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like in a lot of these situations, the big jump of the shark moment comes after whatever you've been trying to do is kind of already past its natural endpoint, where you've had several years of storytelling under one sort of premise, and the desire to keep it going, regardless of whether there's more stuff to do, is what births these like sort of radical ideas. I mean, you could also argue that like something like the death of Superman or Nightfall, those were jump the shark moments. Those were moments where they're like, we just like literally with the Superman editors, they just didn't know what else to do except kill him. So they did, and then everything.
And they've been doing it over and over again ever
Yeah,
since.
exactly. Exactly. And I feel like that's kind of the problem with like a lot of extended ongoing franchises or series, is that you are going to kind of come to these jump the shark moments, but like what gets worse is, like the Fawns jumped over a shark once. There isn't like a continued series of the Fawns jumping the shark, but because we're in this space now where like franchises just go on infinitely, there's always going to be all of these instances where they jump the shark multiple times, and then they have to forcefully pull back and try again. I've been watching the James Bond movies again because they're on Netflix now, so I figured, hey, let's start from the top and go forward. And the James Bond movies, man, they jump the shark constantly, and they know they do too, because then they try to undo it with the next movie. So you can make an argument that a lot of people, when they first recast James Bond with George Lazenby in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, there were some people who were like, right then and there, you've jumped the shark. This is no longer fun and entertaining because it's not Sean Connery anymore. And every time there is a new Bond actor, someone's always like, okay, you've jumped the shark. This guy cannot be James Bond. This guy is not allowed to be James Bond, yada, yada, yada. But even when you get past that, because that particular actor then needs to have like their sort of defining movie, that thing then ends up becoming like the new jump the shark moment. So like with Sean Connery, it was Goldfinger, and Goldfinger is like the blueprint for James Bond movies going forward. And you go back and you watch all of Connery's movies in order, Goldfinger is not that good, and everything bad about James Bond movies that come after it can all be traced to it. Every bad decision in every bad James Bond movie is when they were just trying to make Goldfinger. So like that feels like a jump the shark moment. But then you've got Roger Moore, and he literally goes to space in Moonraker, and you're like, okay, clearly that's a bridge too far. But then Timothy Dalton makes like a gritty, bloody PG-13 thriller, and people are like, okay, that's way too far. Then Daniel Craig comes in, and he's like, what if he got old after 2 movies? That's too far.
Love that every Daniel Craig Bond movie is the last Bond movie.
I know, it's so annoying.
Yeah, I don't know, there's like some interesting stuff done just in the fact of like when you're dealing with these long running franchises, and you've got to like consistently come up with new stories and not have them feel formulaic, but also give everyone exactly what they came to him for. Otherwise, you can't keep making them. And so, like, people just start throwing shit at the wall. I think to a similar degree, but kind of in the opposite way, I think you have things that jumped the shark in that they tried to be too heartfelt, and they just spent so long being irreverent that it doesn't work. So, like, for me, that's like Family Guy. I've never like loved Family Guy, but I'll watch an episode here or there, or I'll see like a clip and it'll get me a laugh or two. But then like Family Guy will try to do like these, heartfelt, more character focused episodes, and I'm just like, nah, you've all been awful to each other. You just can't,
Yeah.
I can't believe this kind of. You can't just pretend. Oh well, those are only jokes. Those don't count. This is the real characters or whatever. I'm like, just fucking no. You've. This is not you. You don't get to do this. This doesn't work for you because, like in your episode that tries to say something interesting, you also have Brian like eat a poopy diaper for no fucking reason, and it just undercuts the whole fucking point. Um, and like you get similar things to The Simpsons. Um, Again,
Yeah.
they've just been going for so long, and they used to be able to do like the more heartfelt stuff, but then they've just kept going and going and going to the point where like I remember a couple years ago they did this where they do an episode where it's a flashback to Homer as a teenager, and they have him being a teenager in the 90s when his show was already running. And it's just like, no, just no. Like, you can't. Because I remember there was an older episode of The Simpsons where you see, like, one of Homer and Marge's dates before they had the kids, and Homer, like, walks out of a movie theater and goes, wow, I can't believe Darth Vader was Luke's father the whole time, and all the people in line get pissed off at him. And it's like, well, just how the fuck can you make that work? How was he a teenager in the 90s if he was on a date with Marge right before he had kids in the fucking 80s? Like, it just, you're contradicting the fuck out of yourself. Another one with The Simpsons that got pointed out was there was a recent-ish episode where Lisa started playing the saxophone and Homer was getting annoyed by it. When Sheila was like first starting and like he hated it and tried to discourage her, and people that are like long running fans of the show are just like, no, that's their whole relationship, is he's the one that got her the saxophone and supported her. I'm like, well, yeah, but the shit's been running for so long that like the writers don't know that anymore. And we've just forgotten how to, like, that these are supposed to be actual characters, and now they're just archetypes of a shitty family that to each other. And so it's just the show has jumped the shark because it can't do emotional realism anymore.
I feel like Futurama has this problem too, with all the times it was canceled and revived, and how every time that happens, that becomes the premise of an episode or a season. Where like the last time it ended before the latest Hulu revival, which I don't know if that's still going anymore or not. You had a really heartfelt episode with Fry and Leela stuck with the entire world frozen around them, and they got to live an entire life. And then at the end of the episode, the professor finds a way to bring them back, and they have to decide, like, now that they're old and they lived a whole life, do they want to go back and do it again? And then they decide yes. And it's really sweet, and it's really romantic, and it's really nice. And then they just come back and do another season. And it just
Yeah.
feels like you cannot do those stories with them anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I would agree with you if not for the fact that, like, every Futurama ending was better than the last Futurama
You're
ending.
right. You're right. I guess it remains to be seen if the next Futurama ending is better.
Because
It
that
is
one,
interesting.
like, that season kind of ended on an interesting note, but I don't know if it was like they've just decided that every time they do a season now they're just gonna end on one of those just in case they don't get to come back again.
But I do sort of feel like if you're keeping up with them long enough, then these start to become problems in a way that maybe they don't if like you were first exposed to it much later down the line. I feel like that's kind of the problem you run into now with a lot of like younger comic book fans who will see a character do something and be aghast and be surprised and be like, Batman would never do that. And it's because they have not read a Batman comic published before the year 2000. That's why they don't think Batman would do that.
Oh. Oh. Yeah. Like even then, like there's some 2000 stuff that I'm like, because what was I reading with Batman? It was No Man's Land. I remember really liking No Man's Land the first time I read through it, and then I tried to read
Yeah.
through it again in like the 2010s, and I was like, oh no,
It's a slog.
Batman. Well, no, I still like No Man's Land, but there's just like this one little offhand comment from Batman. It's like, of course, the people that run to Scarface are the people who don't know any better. And he like lists off some stuff, and then he just goes, welfare recipients. I'm like, oh, maybe there is something to this like right wing fascination with Batman that I haven't been given enough credit. Um,
Yeah, I feel like especially now where like runs don't go for more than 2 years at a time anymore, and there's always like a new number one all the time. You just don't have
mhm.
that sort of long-term memory, and so every sort of minor deviation in the status quo starts to feel like an insane jump the shark moment, even if like historically or canonically at that point it's not. I feel like there was a lot of people when we were talking about Tom King's run back when that was still coming out issue to issue, where people were just like complaining about everything, like it was the first time
Oh yeah.
Batman's ever had a sustained love interest, or it was the first time a Batman comic did some vague Orientalism with an Al Ghul family member. Like I get what people are saying if this is the only Batman book they have ever read in their life. But if it's not, then I think you might want to do some homework.
I'm still like I think I've just come to the opinion that if you don't want Orientalism in your books, then we just can't use the El Ghul family anymore, which makes Damien really awkward.
Yep. Yep.
I I don't think there's a way around it at this point. Like, and that being said, even with that caveat, I think Denny O'Neil still did some really fucking great like character building with Ra's al Ghul, but you just have to accept that it's still based on Orientalist tropes, and trying to like blame Grant Morrison or Tom King for that is it's just not their fault. That's just what the character is. And we either just need to accept it and move the fuck on, or I don't know, maybe just go the Liam Neeson route and go, no, Ra's al Ghul is actually a white guy.
You
Like
have
maybe
an Asian
Nolan
guy
was ahead
right
of the
there,
curve
but
on that.
Liam Neeson was the...
Well, like maybe Nolan was just ahead of the curve on it. He's like, oh, I don't know, this got some like weird racy things. Maybe I'll just make him a white guy, and we'll just make it a twist. uh, I don't know. It's there's some weird stuff with that, but that's neither here nor there. When did Ra's al Ghul jump the shark?
pretty immediate on that front, I feel like.
I know.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I feel like people's threshold for jumping the shark gets kind of colored based on their level of exposure to a certain franchise or their experience with a franchise. I mean, if you grew up with like the classic Bond movies as part of like your movie vernacular, then the idea that Moonraker goes to space just is not a big deal. In a way that it might be if your first exposure to the Bond movies is like Daniel Craig or something. And that there is something to be said for like, are we maybe being a little too pure with the premise if we can't do something wild and take a swing and allow that direction to kind of play out? But that's sort of why I mentioned that other definition at the beginning of like, I feel like there is still something to be said for like, once you've made this turn, you don't even have the same premise anymore, and it makes sustaining that in any sort of long way kind of impossible. The Grant Morrison Animal Man's a really good example of this, because it's one of those stories where at the end, the Animal Man gets to meet and talk to Grant Morrison, and they just have a whole conversation. And at the end of the book, there's really nowhere to go but for Grant Morrison, the character, to just rewrite the ending so that Buddy has his family back and everything's okay. Uh, and that's just the way it has to end, and you just go from there. But you go from there with a revised status quo, because that moment of Buddy getting to meet his writer in that moment it's so out there that there's just nothing else to do in that direction anymore. That you've kind of sealed that opportunity away.
Yeah, and it's funny to hear Morrison talk about that because then it just kind of got him typecast as the meta writer.
Right.
Um,
Right.
uh, I don't know. The Animal Man one's interesting because yeah, it just like it broke that character kind of forever. Like
Yep.
anyone else that does anything with him, it's like they kind of have to just acknowledge off the bat. Well, it's not going to be anything like the Morrison run, or I'm just going to go like take it more back to his roots and not do what Morrison was doing with him. And it's like, no, I kind of need like Animal Man to take like a more serious Deadpool turn at this point, and to just be acknowledged, be like the only one that really gets that he's a fictional character at this point. Is I feel like the only way you could have gone with that to continue the premise, but that's also just most writers probably aren't good enough to make that interesting without it just becoming Deadpool.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing that they tried to do after Morrison left, because Morrison's run isn't very long, like 20 odd issues, I think. But at that point, Animal Man was still an ongoing, and it was a Vertigo title. And so you had like Peter Milligan take over from there. You had Jamie Delano write it for a minute, and they tried to maintain that sort of like serious, uh, kind of meta, not really meta, but more like in that Swamp Thing Alan Moore territory of like trying to make Man feel a little bit more prestige. And some of those runs are good. Like they're not bad books, but it is like you said, like it broke the character a little bit. Like you just kind of couldn't. You either were in conversation with Grant Morrison, or you were trying to avoid Grant Morrison at all costs, and it was damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Well, like again, I still have like varied opinions on this because sometimes I do just come off like, no, let me play with my toys, and I don't love that. But I think there is something of a beauty to that, like baton pass. The creatives change, but the character is like evergreen. That's unique about American comic book characters that some people see as just an inherent flaw, and I think there is something, really special about it. And it kind of annoys me sometimes when a writer will come on and just like, nope, no one else can use this character now. They've just kind of broken him forever. We just have to deal with that reality. There's like, it's one of those things. I guess I'm just calling me a hypocrite because when it's good, that's okay. But if I don't like it, then fuck you. Don't do that.
There's an argument to be made. Heath Ledger and Nolan kind of did that with the Joker, right? Like they developed a take that was so iconic, so pop culturally constantly parodied and relevant, so invasive in the entire pop culture landscape. The Joker's just kind of never been as good since. And you get like little pockets here and there. Like I still think Tom King writes a really good Joker, but what are the great Joker stories post Heath Ledger Joker in The Dark Knight, right?
Whatever the
There-
fuck people see in Scott Snyder's Joker writing.
and like that's really bad. Like the Scott Snyder Joker is awful for a lot of reasons, but like
The
even when
worst
people
Joker
talk
writer,
about how
and the fact that people love him, I don't even know what to do with it.
yeah, like he's got a really bad take on Joker. James Tynion's got a really bad take on Joker. King's got a good take on Joker, but it is still more in that like serial killer horror movie kind of vibe, and not a comedian per se. His Joker, to his credit, is funny. He tells
Yeah.
jokes. Like he's actually really funny, but he is still closer to that Heath Ledger vibe than like old school Dennis O'Neil or Steve Englehart Joker, who's just campy. And we don't get a
Mhm.
lot of that anymore, I think in part because of The Dark Knight.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not even talking about what the fuck they've done with him on film since. They just
Right.
cannot get away from that, like, anti-society kind of vibe. And you've seen that, like, come through both with Leto and with, what's his name? Joaquin Phoenix. they're just portraying this like very antisocial kind of thing that like feels so. I see where you get that interpretation after watching Heath Ledger's Joker performance, but like it really feels like just this Hollywood, what's the thing that people liked about this? Oh, it's this, and they always pick like the wrong thing that like really attached people to it, you know?
Yeah.
Um it wasn't the punk rock that like fully meshed with people. People didn't really care. Like they liked it, but that wasn't like the main thing people were attached to with it. It was the fucking nihilism of of the Joker in Dark Knight that really fucking worked for people, and just because that's, I don't know, where we were as a society in 2008. And that's the part that hasn't translated over, at least not to the same degree as, oh, but it's punk rock. Oh,
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
a whole thing.
they take the wrong lessons when stuff gets popular, and not to kind of bounce all over the place, but I think Star Wars is really guilty of this. Uh, you go back and you read like historical reviews of Empire Strikes Back, and people said they jumped the shark immediately because of the Luke and Vader thing.
Hmm.
But I mean, I don't think that that's a genuine criticism, and I don't think they did because you wouldn't think of Star Wars the way you do now without that. But since then, I think there have been a lot of stuff, both in the EU and in the later sequel stuff, where I think there is like an argument to be made of like, are we still even doing Star Wars anymore? Uh, the Rise of Skywalker really feels like that same sort of Joker mentality of like, you took the wrong lesson, you overcorrected, you saw that a lot of people didn't like the Last Jedi for one reason or another, forgetting for the fact whether it was valid or not, and you thought what you needed to do was retreat in the exact opposite direction. So what did you do? You revived Palpatine off screen and then just gave us a title card that says, by the way, he's back. Like,
No, they didn't
that seems
revive
like.
him off screen, Steve. They revived him in Fortnite, the cultural institution of our time. Like,
And you've got, like, I think Rise of Skywalker is probably the closest example to what I'm thinking of as far as like a thing just breaking a franchise irreversibly, because Poe Dameron being like, somehow Palpatine has returned, has just made that a completely worthless franchise, in my opinion, at this point. Like,
it's
there
so
just
bad.
feels like there's nothing to glean from this anymore. If this is what you're doing, if this is where we are, then why even bother?
One day we'll have to talk about Rise of Skywalker, but that would mean I'd have to watch it again, which I can't do because they just quit making Star Wars movies after The Last Jedi. They just decided they were done. Um,
They were. They did stop making movies after that. Rise of Skywalker's not really.
Rise of Skywalker. You talk about that like weird AI fan thing that went around? Is that what? Is
Yeah.
that Rise of Skywalker? Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think of that as the example of like, okay, this is the Fonz jumping over the shark. This is the point of no return. This is where you create a demarcation of like, this is when shit gets irreversibly bad.
Yeah, I don't know. There's some to that because I think you and I had similar takeaways with like the MCU, where I'm not as hardcore against Endgame as you are, but I still didn't love it. And now like everyone's turned on that fucking franchise to the point where they're
Yeah.
running again. They're running back and they're trying to get the whole cast that like took their final bows back into it in one way or another for Doomsday, including bringing back the same directors from Infinity War and Endgame. And it's like, oh no, look, see, we can still do this. And I've seen stupid arguments of like people on Twitter like, oh well, you wonder why they're bringing Chris Evans back? It's because you guys weren't supporting Sam Wilson, Captain America. You weren't supporting it with Anthony Mackie, and they were trying all this stuff. You guys just didn't come out and support it. So of course they're running back to the actors that it worked for, and it's like, no. People didn't support it because it was bad. Like,
Right.
um,
It cannot be stressed enough how awful Captain America: Brave New World is. Okay, it doesn't matter what your opinion is on Anthony Mackie or Falcon Cap or any of that stuff. That is a garbage movie.
yeah, because like you and I, for as bad as post Endgame MCU is, you and I still genuinely liked Falcon and Winter Soldier. So like, it's not that they didn't know how to write good stuff anymore. It's just that they like stopped.
And there is something to like when you have your big finale, when you have your big ending that you were building to up to that point with Thanos and killing off Tony Stark and giving Steve Rogers his ending and all that stuff. That is also just another example of like you have now irrevocably changed the status quo. You have now decided that this phase is over. And your inability to commit to that is what's causing this to not work because there are plenty of things I feel like that kind of reinvent themselves halfway through or early on, and when they do, it creates kind of a schism where like some people are really happy about the original run of things, and then other people are more into the new way of doing it. But they're both kind of valid because they both have at least a strong direction or at least a strong focus. But that's not what happened with the MCU. What happened with the MCU is you got a finale and then everything afterwards sucked because you had no idea what to do with it. You can have like a reasonable like Terminator versus Terminator 2 dichotomy there of like one person likes the gritty horror movie, the other person likes the sci-fi action movie, but they're both worthwhile. But that's not what's happening here. It's not like Brave New World was a movie that was radically different from the other Captain America movies and then was lambasted for it. No, it just sucked ass. That's what happened.
Still haven't seen it. Um, no, it's just wild because like what my opinion on MCU post Endgame has been for a long time is like, no, the movies actually didn't get any worse. It's just that like society as a whole got such a big break from it because you had Endgame, and then you had the pandemic, and the next movie that was supposed to come out after Endgame was Black Widow. And then the pandemic just kept delaying it and delaying it and delaying it, and it delayed it to the point where like Loki and all these other and like Disney Plus series hit first, before you finally got to Black Widow. And then Black Widow was just like so fucking bad because it's such a weird choice to like finally give Black Widow her own movie after she's already died in the main canon. So it just makes it feel like this weird little fucking filler story. um, that just didn't need to be at. Why didn't they just release it before that? Like, what were they thinking? It's such a weird fucking like blip of a film, for no reason.
And the MCU like had these moments before Endgame where they made a big jump or they changed the status quo dramatically, and they were good. Like they were worthwhile choices and they were directions that they follow, but like very quickly they would then go back and regress to back what they were. They couldn't commit to it. Iron Man 3 is a really good example of you took something from the comics that just kind of fundamentally speaking of Orientalism does not work, and you made a worthwhile story out of it. You changed that direction drastically, but because of the fan backlash, you decided to then slowly reverse course and introduce the real Mandarin later. Or you had Captain America take down Shield because Shield was infiltrated by Hydra in the Winter Soldier, but then you immediately brought Shield back in the next Captain America movie.
No, it wasn't even the next Captain America movie. It
Or
was
the
the next Avengers
movie.
movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fucking they just show up and they're like, everything's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, like you didn't you took a swing that I think you could have had support for, but then you just immediately went back on it.
No, for sure. I still like my thesis statement is recasting Ed Norton with Mark Ruffalo was like the original sin of the MCU and then the complete retcon at this point of Iron Man 3 was them like fully just committing that there will never be another artistic decision made in this franchise.
Yeah.
Like, you know, even if you dislike Iron Man 3, you have to at least give it that it was trying to make a statement and do something with the character beyond just being another like entry in the franchise. And it's not that they didn't still do stuff and make statements on characters after that, but like that was not the driving force of any decision after that. And the fact that, again, it's just so fascinating how absolutely no decision in Iron Man 3 has stood the test of time. It has slowly, at every level, been whittled away to not existing as a film anymore. It has fully been retconned out, which I find fascinating.
Which is such a shame, because, like, I still think it's the best Iron Man movie by a compared to the other two. But
I mean, Iron Man 2 really doesn't hold up. Like, that was fully just, you had to be there at the time to, like, really appreciate it. And Iron Man 1, I mean, it's a good thing. It started the whole MCU. It's a fun popcorn movie. But Iron Man 3 is, like, arguably one of the only things that has something to say about Tony as a character in the entirety of the MCU.
Yeah, and I mean, Marvel Comics and Iron Man in particular are also like no stranger to these like massive status quo swings that alienate a bunch of people. But the difference between the movies and the comics is that the comics actually let you commit to it for a little while. Michelini and Layton making Tony an alcoholic and doing Demon in a Bottle, like that's a big swing. That's a massive shift. And then O'Neill comes in and takes it further by having him relapse and be homeless and not wear the armor for like in real time, like 2 years of comics. Like those are things that are allowed to like develop and stew, and those could be like your jump the shark moments of like, okay, if Tony Stark's an alcoholic bum living on the street and he's not Iron Man, then this is your demarcation line of I just don't want to read Iron Man anymore. And you could read everything before that and have a good time and ignore everything after that. But it's not a dummy choice like it is now. Because now what you would be saying is, no worries, he'll be back in the suit and none of this will matter in like 3 weeks. Compared to then, where it felt like it felt like he just was not the main character of the title anymore at that point. And that's not really a thing that Marvel lets us do anymore. But you read those old comics, you read that Dennis O'Neill run, and it really feels like we took a big swing with this character. We did something that we hadn't done before, and the tragedy of how all that ends is the very next run pretends like none of it ever happened.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to get more back to, like the jumping the shark concept proper. Is it doesn't feel like you have that same luxury with, you know, your shows and stuff, your shows and your movies, that you do in the comics. Because, like, there's this concept of, well, the writers, right? But, like, TV shows and movies, even though they have different writers, they're seen as more of, like, a cohesive unit than, like, a run on a comic series is.
Sure, yeah.
You know, like, not just series as in, like, one writer's run, but, like, series as in the entirety of a character's history and books. So, and I think, like, it has more to do with the fact that, like, when you have different artists and writers on a comic, there's more dissociation, there's more of, like, a hard line between, you know, run to run and even arc to arc, when you have artists switching, or even issue to issue in some cases, where you can't get the same artist for a full story arc. But, like, then you have the difference that, like, makes it feel more cohesive, even though it can be just as volatile, is the fact that you've got the same cast for, like, the entirety of a TV show or the entirety of, like, a film franchise. So it feels more cohesive, even though it might be just as volatile or even maybe more so. for like a long running TV show or like a long running film franchise. Like
Yeah,
how
and
many?
when you're
There's an interesting thought. How many film franchises with like multiple entries even have the same writer twice? Um, that's that's just an interesting thought to dwell on for a second there. Much less
interestingly,
like more than once, more than twice.
interestingly, the James Bond franchise has had the same pair of writers work on both the Brosnan reboot and the Craig reboot.
That's a, yeah, wow. That's wildly different takes. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's kind of a weird sort of order of operations with Bond movies where since Brosnan, you'd basically have the script be written, you'd pick a book that it's based on or a short story or whatever, you'd write the movie, and then you'd get Purvis and Wade to punch it up and put in the action scenes and stuff, and that's what gives it like its distinct Bond flavor. They're almost like the Dave Filoni, John Favreau of Star Wars at that point, where you get people in to write the movie, but then you have to give it to the quality control people to make sure it's all consistent. Um,
That's
but
funny.
to your point of like shows and movies and stuff, the other sort of big difference is when you have actors, they do get exhausted from doing the same kinds of stories or the same kinds of roles over and over and over again. And I think that's also part of what contributes to this idea of like, we need to do something wildly different. We need to give these people different ways to engage with the material. We need to give them excuses to give different kinds of performances. Otherwise, they're just not going to like doing this forever. Sean Connery, like famously, he was bored with playing James Bond and was kind of fed up with it after just the first three movies. There are so many stories about him not wanting to do publicity during Thunderball and refusing to speak to the press and being cranky on set all the time, and how they got him to come back for not only Diamonds Are Forever but also Never Say Never Again Later is just wild to me because of just how much he hated making his last two proper movies, because by that point it had become so formulaic. And that's sort of what facilitates them wanting to make a really big swing and recast or do a weirder movie like Live and Let Die with Roger Moore, uh, or Roger Moore being in the role for so long, doing everything from like a weird New York blaxploitation film to a weird Batman movie in a sense with Man with the Golden Gun to a big Cold War movie to finally like fuck it, let's just take him to the moon.
Fuck it, we're going to space.
Yeah, we're just gonna go to space and he's gonna be firing lasers. That's where we're at.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's a wild thing that you see like these different things going for so long that they have to start taking like wilder and wilder swings. Let's talking about space for a sec. So I'll like transition to Star Trek. Like
Yeah,
I like DS9. It's like a good show, but it is weird to watch and just be like, wow, this is just so not Star Trek though.
yeah.
They just like took the name brand and attached it to its own thing, and like it like is so funny to hear all the Star Trek fans talk about, oh, this is the best Star Trek show. I'm like, so you don't even really like what Star Trek is meant to be then, do you? You just wanted your space show. That's all you actually cared about. Because this is just, I mean, it's well written. It's good television, but it's just not what this series was envisioned as, and what it was supposed to be about. To the point where you have like Cisco sitting there talking about why it's okay to commit war crimes. It's just that's not what the fucking vision was supposed to be, guys. Um,
And to an extent, you do feel like by the time DS9 ends and you're going on to like Enterprise and Voyager, they are kind of overcorrecting for how different DS9 ended up being.
well, it's so funny because like DS like Voyager and DS9 are almost like have instances of running concurrently. And it's almost like they're both fighting for like the soul of the franchise.
Yeah,
To a
exactly.
degree. And then yeah, Enterprise is just Enterprise. Um,
But
And I don't know what the
to
fuck's
your
been
point,
going on since.
though about DS9, because DS9 spins out of the Borg stuff with TNG, and both shows are on at the same time for a little bit, and I think that's one of your better examples of. So we have jumped the shark, we have done something radically different, but both directions are valid, and both directions are options you can go down, even if they're not 100% compatible. So you can watch TNG and get your fill of the classic Gene Roddenberry vision of Star Trek, or you can watch DS9 and follow this sort of darker turn that TNG doesn't have room to explore. And they're both very different visions, but they're equally worthwhile in one way or another, and that's really rare. I feel like you don't get a ton of that when someone like fundamentally breaks the guiding principle of a series like that. It doesn't usually go well, let alone it being like a fan favorite series.
Yeah, that's a good point. I can't really think of something that diverts that hard away from it.
There is a bit when Buffy and Angel are on at the same time where they like radically, but by the time you get to Angel season 3, they're basically the same.
Okay. Um, I don't know. I've never watched those, so I can't tell. I can't comment on it. One day Steve's
I
gonna
think
just like strap me down and make me watch Buffy and Angel. um,
there was a universe where I would have done that before the Joss Whedon stuff came out a few years ago. Now I'm like, yeah, no, fuck it, you're fine. You don't have to watch any of them. Uh, I I think sitcoms have this really hard too, where you're just in a status quo that has to be preserved for the sake of the joke for so long that at a certain point it gets stale and you just have to go big or go home. I
oh
know,
shit!
I know
I've
for
got a good one on that.
okay. I
Fucking
was gonna mention
Scrubs.
Frasier, or yeah,
Oh,
Scrubs too.
Frasier. Yeah, Scrubs is like brilliant television in its early stages. It's like really trying to do something new and different, but then it just keeps going on for so long. They like start killing off cast members because they think they're getting canceled and they want to say something, or they think that the show's ending and they want to say something. And then they get renewed for another season, so they have to like bring that character back or bring the cast member back as a new character and just make it a joke in order to like justify it, and then they like do another season or two, and then they like finally end the show. The final episode's called My Finale, and it ends with video of the cast and crew like hugging each other, and then it gets renewed for another season, so they have to make a completely new show, and it's so shit.
Yeah,
And now it's like
Scrubs is a
Zach
lot.
Braff and what's his name that plays Turk and like the whole fucking cast. Now they're just doing commercials as their characters, basically. It's
They're
so
doing a revival
embarrassing.
apparently too.
Oh God, I hope not.
I know. I saw the news about that like a year ago. The progress is at this point, but they're bringing it back again for some goddamn reason. I mean,
Oh God,
Scrubs
that
is a
sounds
really good
terrible.
example. Uh, with when Daphne and Niles get together in Frasier, I think that's a big one where it sort of feels like you've kind of broken those character dynamics irrevocably by doing this. But I don't know. I think the Daphne Niles stuff is some of the best writing that show's ever done. Um, there's that ongoing plot point of Daphne gaining weight and Niles not realizing it, and then she has to go away and come back after she's lost weight. And Frasier and Niles have this conversation of like, you've fantasized about her for so long that now that you're together, you don't even really see her anymore. Like that kind of stuff I thought was really really good in that series. But I've seen people talk about the show where they're like, yeah, everything got worse after they got together. And I'm like, I don't know. I thought it just stayed good the entire run.
Frasier is one of the few examples of a long running show that doesn't have a bad episode, in my opinion.
I
Um,
agree with you.
yeah, it's a wild fucking ride. Like there's still some like odd choices. Don't get me wrong, but like the just within the context of the episode itself, it's good. Um, when fucking they do a whole episode of Frasier's old babysitter having a relationship with his dad, and then that
Oh
just lasts
yeah,
throughout the rest of the
that's
series. It's like
so good.
it's awkward as fuck now, but like it works within the context of the show.
That shit's so good. I love that one.
Yeah.
There was one where like he thinks he's going out on a date with a cop, but the cop actually wants to go out with his dad. That's really fun too.
Yeah, his dad's the fucking ladies' man that Frasier never can be. Um,
Love it.
yeah. Ugh.
um, sitcoms really do kind of swing for the fences in that way, and like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, I think there's a lot of people like with Seinfeld. They thought it stopped getting funny once Susan and George were engaged. Like once that relationship became like a focal point of a lot of the episodes, the series kind of lost its way for some people. Uh, and then King of the Hill is another weird one where there is like a specific point where it stops being as dramatically heavy, where like
Mm.
the ongoing stories and the multi-parters and stuff just stop. I can't really pinpoint where that was, so it's not necessarily a jump the shark moment, but there is a point in that show somewhere where like it becomes more cartoony as opposed to a sitcom, and I think the quality does dip a little bit, but it's like Frasier, where I just don't think there's ever a bad episode of that series.
Yeah, I don't know. Trying to think more on like the other side of the jump the shark that I think we kind of talked about for a little bit, then got onto this side more of like instances where it's just well now it's just too ridiculous, it can't be taken seriously. I feel like Scrubs
Yeah.
was that where it's just what the fuck are you guys doing anymore? Like, and I've watched the last season of Scrubs, and it has some funny jokes. Like there's Dr. Cox's introduction to the new characters and stuff, his first scene in the new season, is him walking into a room full of medical students, and he goes, "Now listen, I know that you all worked very hard to get here, and you fooled a lot of people into thinking you're just an innocent medical student, but I'm well aware that all of you are assassins that want to kill my patients. And if you want to take an ear or a finger as a trophy, I can respect and understand that. But just don't lie to me and tell me that you actually care and want to save these people. Okay, let's be frank with each other." It's just like imagining being a fucking student hearing that for the first time from
That's
your
so good.
like, teacher is like it was still it's the same writers and everything. They're trying their best, but it just like it became unacceptable because they're trying to like introduce these new characters. It's trying to do so much at once when clearly they were done. It was over. The studio just couldn't commit to a decision. And so it just became too like absurd to accept, too impossible to really get invested in, that like even though the comedy was still top game, the heart of the show had always been the characters that this is all revolving around, and it just didn't have that. Like JD came to be a teacher for half of one season and then left again, and it's just like what the fuck are we getting invested in here? How is he only a teacher for half the season? Like who would fucking hire someone to be a teacher for like 6 weeks?
Yes, Scrubs. The end of Scrubs is weird because you're kind of playing at a longer development for your characters that you have to commit to, and if you don't, it just doesn't work. Sitcoms that are kind of founded in that way, where like there's a clear end point, I feel like have these problems a lot. Like How I Met Your Mother.
Oh
How I Met Your Mother has so many instances you can point to where it starts to get bad, but I think when it like really sort of becomes you've just lost the plot here is when Barney and Robin get together, because by that point when you get there it starts to become really clear that this weirdly incestuous friendship either isn't going anywhere because every relationship is just a means to get to whoever the mother is, or this is the end game, in which case it just makes everyone feel like a worse person for staying in this friend group for so long. There's
Yeah.
so many instances in the show where like they like tease who the mother is going to be, and they always use that as some sort of like weird sugarcoating when when Ted like breaks up with someone or someone breaks up with him, so that whatever emotional weight there would have been to like that relationship doesn't hit fully, because you're always pointing towards this other direction of, but don't worry, he's gonna meet the one. He's gonna meet his real wife later down the line. And I think when Barney and Ted start passing around Robin like that, that's when it gets to the point of like, okay, now it just doesn't matter. Because now none of the relationships matter. Because this is all you're doing. You're just trading around the same people, and you're always going to try and justify it because the premise of your show is that he's going to find someone that you were never told who it is until the end of the show, at which point it stops mattering.
Well, and then that's not even talking about just how bad the ending was. No, like this is how I met your mother. But I really, really just actually wished I was with your Aunt Robin the whole time.
Right.
And it's just fucking like, particularly because in that final season, they do an episode that's all about him just finally letting his feelings for Robin go. And it's like actually probably the best episode of the entire series, arguably. But then it's like, it means nothing. Oh shit, alright, here's another one. Here's another one, Steven, I know you'll agree with me. It's not a sitcom, but another, like, the series jumped the shark. And this happened early. The Flash Season 2 has a really good episode written by Kevin Smith, Whatever Happened to the Fastest Man Alive, where he, like, gets over the fact that he didn't get to grow up with his mom, you know, that she's gone. And then how does that fucking season end? He just goes back and does Flashpoint. And
he just does Flashpoint.
So that episode didn't mean anything. It just completely... I never wanted to watch Flash again after that season 2 finale. It was absolute shit at that point. Like, you just can't... You can't do that to someone emotionally. There's a difference between, like, being a writer and knowing how to tease your audience and like pull on the emotional heartstrings and play with expectations, and then just there's a difference between that. Like I think George R.R. Martin does a good job of doing that with his audience, and then just, you know, doing one thing so you can quote unquote subvert expectations by doing the exact opposite later.
Oh no, 100%.
It's not a fine line. It's just one is good use of storytelling devices and leading your audience, and the other is just plain for drama.
No, 100%. I feel like specifically with shows like that were on the old style cable where you had 22 to 25 episodes a season and you were rolling out a new season every single year, there's always going to be like this crunch time of you got to be able to churn out episodes and do this formula over and over again, and it gets kind of exhausting, and you might lead to like contradictions here and there or inconsistent character arcs, and that's fine, that's whatever. But Flashpoint is such a bonkers way to end a season that up until that point, you're right, was basically giving Barry an arc that would make something like Flashpoint seem inconceivable. And Flashpoint is genuinely just one of the worst comic book events ever. Like, it's awful. I hate the fact that the entirety of the modern Flash as a concept is just constantly tied to Jeff Johns' Barry Allen fanfics, because all of it is awful. But Flashpoint in particular is so bad because it's always that writer excuse now of, because the Flash can go back and change time, you've now broken the series to the point where that's your solution to everything all the time. And it becomes a recurring problem in that show where whatever rules there were to time travel, whatever lessons that Barry learns through the Flashpoint event, or any of the stuff leading up to his decision to Flashpoint, none of it matters. Because you're just going to, now that you have opened this door, you're never going to not walk through it, because they do that shit again and again and again and again, to the point where even the message of that story is incoherent by the end, because the whole point of Flashpoint is you can't go back in time and fix something for yourself because it's unfair to the rest of the universe that you have fucked up, which they illustrate by Barry going back in time and fixing the thing that he fucked up and fucking it up again.
Well, like, I think I remember seeing, like, the community around it posting, like, memes, and they took, like, a clip from Big Bang Theory where, like, everyone's dressed up as the Flash for a costume party or whatever, and the caption was, at this point, literally, this is Barry's house the night his mom dies. There's like 4 different instances of Barry going back to that fucking moment to unfuck the thing in a different way.
Literally, there's literally so many moments where he goes back to that scene. There's like 4 flashes there. It's so fucking dumb. I hate Flashpoint so much. Flashpoint's the jump the shark moment of modern superhero comics where everything after this just gets demonstrably worse.
Yeah, no, I buy it. It's funny just how fucking bad Flashpoint has become, because I still like things about the initial premise, and like I enjoy things about the original comic story, but man, oh man, it's gotten out of hand at this point. And also the movie sucked.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I had one other thing I did want to mention before we wrap up, but the
Sure.
other sort of big sitcom where this happens a lot is Friends. I've never been a Friends guy. I never really found it all that funny. Maybe it was a little ahead. Maybe it was like, maybe I was too old when I first watched it, or I was too young when it first came out. I don't know. But Friends just never was funny to me. But whenever I tried watching it, it had the same problem that we were talking about with How I Met Your Mother, where it felt like you can't invest in any of the relationships because every relationship is just a punchline to reset the status quo. So there's no like one singular moment that I think is like the jump the shark moment of like, this is when it gets bad, because I think the whole thing's bad. But early on in that show, when the we were on a break, you cheated on me debate happens with Ross and Rachel, I think that's kind of the fundamental breaking point for why I just never find that show funny, because you've allowed this vagueness to define these two characters' relationship forever now, and because you've done that, you've made everyone in this friend group and everyone in these weird incestuous relationships with their friends, where everyone's just dating each other all the time, always kind of take sides. Yeah, it's really weird. Everyone's just always taking sides on this vagary that you're never coming down to. So you can never really invest in any of the relationships because it always comes back to this argument that you're never going to solve.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, maybe I just, because like we had some girls in our friend group, and you know, like someone would date a girl, and then she'd, you know, like break up with them, but she'd hang out with us while we were dating, while they were dating and whatever. And like, I remember one girl dated 2 guys in the friend group, and then just kind of, no wait, maybe it was 3, kind of. There was like a, sometimes he's in the group, but he's way too old to be hanging out with us, and then he was dating like a 18-year-old when he was like 25. Or maybe even older. It was weird. But like, you know, so like a little bit, but not like to the extent of, oh, off again, on again with 3 different people in this friend group. Like, girl, just go find someone else. Like, come on. Fucking, Hilly likes New Girl a lot, but like that's a problem within that show too, where it's just constantly Jess is, you know, she's not dating all of them, but she's constantly dating Nick off and on again. And it's like, man, this really just shouldn't have been a thing. Like, this show was better than this, and they didn't have to commit to this decision, but they did it anyway.
That's the thing that always kind of bothers me about relationship sitcoms, is like there's plenty of things to make fun of or make jokes about when it comes to relationships, but when you're trying to do like the will they won't they that a lot of sitcoms and TV shows of that era loved doing, you are kind of, you're toying with the audience's emotions and you're setting weird moral precedents for them as characters where these two things often just cannot reconcile. Because in every like will they, won't they story that I've ever seen, at some point, someone's just a shitty person because you have forced this situation so unnaturally so many times.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's like kind of the case with like How I Met Your Mother. It's interesting because How I Met Your Mother starts the year that Friends ends. And I don't think people like at the time were really predicting it to be the successor, so to speak, but it like had art, not the same level of cultural impact, but like it was kind of inarguably by the time it ended the show that replaced Friends.
Yeah, the next big sitcom at that point, yeah.
Like it ran longer than anything else introduced at the same time. It ran longer than any of the spin-off shows that they gave to the spin-off shows or the independent projects they gave to the Friends cast. I know Matthew Perry had like 3 of those. It just kept going and going, and like began to have an outsized cultural impact the way that Friends did. Again, kind of, not nearly to the same extent. No one was getting the Robin haircut, but
yeah, I mean, to a degree, I also feel like How I Met Your Mother may have had that same cultural impact if so many people didn't turn against it by the end. Like they alienated so many people by that last season that I think it just shot that legacy in the foot.
not even the last it's the last episode. It is inarguably the worst final episode of
so
a series ever.
It's so bad. It's so
and
bad.
the fact that like you could tell that they'd committed to that years ago is just offensive television writing, because like so often the show would like do something that was legitimately clever with these characters that you hadn't thought about and hadn't been a part of the show for like 6 seasons or whatever, and then it all came back to, no, I just really wanted to be with Robin the whole time and I was just telling you the story so you'd understand that. What?
I remember watching that final episode. It pissed me off almost immediately because we'd spent the whole last season on Robin and Barney's wedding night, where we were basically arguing that whole season of, no, these two do actually love each other and they're going to go through with it. And then within the first 5 minutes of the finale, there's just montage style, and then they divorced.
Yep. It's so wild.
It's so bad.
Man, oh man. All right, I think we're good. Otherwise, we're just gonna keep shitting on How I Met Your Mother for some reason.
I mean, we can do that too.
There's the podcast to start. Just in the modern day, rewatching every episode of How I Met Your Mother, doing an hour-long podcast on it.
Jesus. That, as the kids say, that is a very problematic show.
Yeah, now it is. Cause I was thinking about fucking Barney and like all the ridiculous things. There's an episode where like Robin says something and it triggers his automatic system where like his bed just disappears into the wall with the girl on it to like get rid of the body or what the fuck ever. It's like, Jesus Christ, fucking Patrick Bateman shit. If you like really think through the implications
there's
Go ahead.
The joke of a gay guy playing a womanizer only goes so far when the womanizer is just straight up rapey.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a whole thing. All right. Well, I think that's gonna do it for this episode. I don't know if it'll be next time we're back or maybe the time after that, but I really want to do an episode on Night of the Seven Kingdoms because that is my shit right now. So that may be next week, maybe the week after. We'll see how things pan out for that. But until next time, everyone, thank you so much for watching. I'm the Philosopher.
And I'm the Luddite.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things. Bye.